Shutter Speed, episode 16. This is our very first Q&A session from our listeners. If you have a question, I'd love to answer it here on this podcast. Today, I'm answering questions about, can you really make money from taking pictures with cell phones? And if I had one choice, one lens, and only one lens I could buy, what would it be? That and more coming up on Shutter Speed.
Do you love photography? Are you somebody that wants more out of your photography, to make money from your photography but don't know how to start? Welcome to Shutter Speed. Your host, Peter Spakowski, will guide you with tips, strategies, interviews, and know-how to start making money to pay for date night, new gear, or start a full-time career with your passion of photography. Let's get this show started. Here's your host, Peter Spakowski.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shutter Speed. My name is Peter Spakowski, and I am your host. Welcome to this podcast. I'm so happy that you're here today. This is a free podcast, and it doesn't matter if you're a hobbyist wanting to make income or if you're somebody already making money from your photography. How can you make more money? This week, we're talking Q&A. Q&A from our listeners. Thank you very much for those that submitted questions. I had several questions. I took a few of them. I couldn't handle all the questions in this episode, but I'll spread them out over future episodes. And if I start getting more, I'll start including them in each week after I talk about the topic that I have each and every week. But thank you again for submitting questions. Just be aware, I usually record 5 or 6 of these in advance. And this is a weekly podcast. It is a free weekly podcast. So just be patient. It might take 5 or 6 weeks before I answer your question online, on the air, and in this podcast. Most of the time, I will write back to you personally. You don't have to wait until the podcast. But thank you for everybody for listening. As I said, this is a free podcast. The only thing that I ask is that you send it to somebody that might benefit from this podcast. Maybe you have a friend or a relative, somebody that wants to start making money from photography, or maybe they're just a good photographer and they don't make money from photography and they've never even thought about it. There's things that we can do as photographers to put images out on the web and we generate income from them even while we sleep. The best money I've ever made is money I make while I sleep. So forward that to one person or more. The more we get listening to this episode, or the more that we get listening to this podcast, the better. The growth rate has been great. I'm seeing double-digit turnover at each and every single episode. So I appreciate everybody listening and everybody that's forwarding this to somebody else that could benefit from it. I invite you to go and check out 2mmacademy.com. Go out there and subscribe to my email list. I'll add you to my email list. I won't send you much, right? It's just to get your information. So when I do release some of the classes that I'm developing, you have first access and you get a special discount code. But if you sign up today, you'll get a list of the top 5 ways to start generating income in your photography. You can start going out and making money from your photography and pay for date night or pay for dinner out this weekend. How great is that? Even if it's Thursday, there's enough time for you to start generating income from the pictures you're taking. Even if they're just on your hard drive sitting there, there's ways that you can go out there and make money from your photography. But thank you again for everybody that submitted questions. If you would like to submit a question for a future episode, go out to 2mmacademy.com and go to the bottom of the website. There's a form where you could submit a question to this podcast. I'll do the best that I can to get it on one of the future episodes, but I'll email you back personally and answer any question that you might have. So today, here's the different questions. I've got 6 that I'm talking about today. If I get through them all, if not, I'll break it up into a future episode. But the first question that I got is, can you really make money using a cell phone? Yes, of course. It's all about being creative. And again, let's be clear. We're not talking about high-end photography, but you can go out there and start making money with your photography using a cell phone. Kelby on Kelby One has a class on how to take better images with your cell phone, with your iPhone. The iPhone 12 Max Pro is fantastic. I've done a previous episode on the iPhone and why you should have the iPhone 12 Pro Max if you're a professional photographer. Go back and listen to episode 5 of Shutter Speed if you're interested in hearing my opinions on why somebody needs an iPhone 12 Pro Max. I'm very picky on phones. I don't upgrade them very often, but I had to have this phone. But yes, you can start making money from your photography by using a cell phone. If you don't have any income to purchase a camera and the only camera you have is your cell phone right now, you can start making money from it. The best camera that you have is the one that you currently have on you. It doesn't matter if you have the world's best camera at home. If all you have is your cell phone at any particular time, that's the best camera, right? The best camera is the one that you currently have. The other thing about providing cell phone pictures is it's a reduced cost to you. You don't have to buy extra gear. You don't have to buy the expensive lenses. You don't have to buy the expensive lighting. Your costs are basically whatever it is costing you for that cell phone. And most people have cell phones these days. So it's not really costing you anything extra. So that's the biggest benefit, I think, with cell phone photography is it doesn't add any additional cost by needing additional gear. You have to learn how to use sunlight. As photographers, the number one thing that you should be learning is light. How does light impact? How do you go and sit in front of a window or go outside in harsh light and take pictures? Use your cell phone for that. You don't need to lug around a big camera to learn how to use lighting and how lighting looks on a certain subject. You don't even need a cell phone. You can just go out there and position people in the sunlight and see how the light interacts with them. How does the light reflect on their face? How do you stand somebody in a shadow next to a white building that's got light kicking off of it? So that's some of the best light that you can have is in shadows, depending on how the light is reflecting on the different surfaces. But cell phone photography, you absolutely can start making money from photography, whether it's stock photography, portrait photography. You're not going to go out there and be a wedding photographer and show up at a wedding with a cell phone. But you can produce some very nice stock images. You can produce some very beautiful portraits by going out and taking pictures with your cell phone. Again, if you want to learn more about cell phone photography, go back and listen to episode 5 of Shutter Speed. The next question. And this one was kind of lengthy, but basically the question is, the person's looking for a very sharp lens. If I had one lens that I could buy, what would it be and why? It basically comes down to 2 lenses, and it really depends. And the biggest factor is cost. So what is the cost that you're willing to spend, and what do you really need the lens for? Those are the 2 things that I really looked at when I was asked this question. But it took me about a half a second to think of the lens that I would purchase if I needed to. And it really all depends on what you need and the reasons why you need it. The first one is, and this is probably my go-to lens, but it's a little bit more costly. So if you don't have a whole lot of money, this might not be the lens that you want to buy. But if it came down to what lens would I buy based on the budget, if I had over $1,500, it would be a 70 to 200. And I would get the lowest f-stop I possibly could. You can actually get a 70 to 200 for under $1,000, but the f-stop's kind of high. And for me, to have a more versatile lens, I wanted a lower f-stop so I could do some maybe low light photography. in a theater, or, not having the best light indoors, you might want to go with the lower f-stop. So it is the 70 to 200. You can do travel photography with that lens. You can do headshots with that lens. If you have that lens, the best focal point to do a headshot is at 72 millimeter. Anywhere between 72 to 85 millimeter is what I would shoot a headshot with that lens. But I can also go out and do portraits. That is my go-to lens when I'm doing portraits in a studio. And depending on the situation with the different lights, I love that lens. I love that lens for low light photography, but it is the 70 to 200. If your budget is not that much, hands down, I've talked about it before. So if you've listened to this podcast before, I'm absolutely in love with the 50 millimeter lens from Sigma. Sigma is producing some beautiful glass right now. And by glass, I'm meaning lenses. Some of the lenses are so sharp and the image is so clear. I mean, I was stunned the first time that I had my Sigma 50 millimeter. I was going to buy a Canon 50 millimeter, and I had a friend suggest to get the Sigma lens. It was about maybe 2/3 the cost. It wasn't half the cost, but it was pretty darn close to what a Canon 50 millimeter would have cost me for the equivalent lens. But it is beautiful, and I can use this lens for portraits. I can use this lens for areas where the space is limited. You can do low light photography, physique photography. You can do boudoir with it. You can take it outside, and you can't really shoot sports, but you can shoot travel photography with it. You can shoot stock photography with it. So those are the two lenses. If I had to pick one lens out of those two, it would probably be the 50 millimeter because of cost, because I can probably do the most with that lens. If I'm in a smaller room, it's not much of a factor with a 50 millimeter. If you have the 70 to 200 and you're inside a house, you're going to have to back up to the wall to take a picture. So that lens pretty much becomes obsolete if you're trying to shoot family gatherings or trying to capture a wider range of people or images when you're indoors. So if it came down to just one lens, it would be the Sigma 50 millimeter. The next question has to do with running your business. This person has a problem with their website. The performance is poor. They're not generating traffic to their website. People are coming to the website. The experience isn't really good, so they're leaving immediately. And I won't mention the provider because I've used them in the past, and I've had similar problems. I had similar problems where I had a website. It was a great website. The performance was lackluster. It wasn't really good. And for SEO, I just wasn't getting the traffic that I needed. And so there are a few things that you need to look at when it comes to your website. The website really needs to be optimized for SEO. And there's a lot that SEO looks at, from performance to tags, to headers, and just overall, how much are you being involved in the website? So it can be really tricky to keep SEO functioning properly. So when people go out there and do a search on Google or any other search engine, it needs to be optimized so when people do a search, it's popping up and it's popping up properly. So one thing that I suggest is you need to go out there and be interactive with your website. If you've got a website and you haven't updated it in 2 months, you're going to start ranking lower and lower in SEO. If you're going out there and updating it once a year, you're dropping every single month after you've made that update. If you make an update, you start going up higher in the SEO ratings. So you're going to show up higher within a website. I've been able to create brand new websites and for my photography business. And I've been able to establish a brand new domain, go out there and create the website, and I've popped up in the first page within 10 weeks. Normally that takes 6 months, but because I used to be a web developer, I used to develop websites, and I used to develop websites for celebrities and sports athletes and different businesses. And so I'm used to going out there and developing websites, but you don't need to have this type of knowledge to have the same result. You just need to be interactive. And if you're making changes every 2 to 3 weeks, your website's going to rank higher. Maybe just go out there and change an image. Add a section with a new image in your website. Write a blog. You can go out and create a new blog every 3 weeks. Maybe it's a special deal on your photography services that you're offering. Maybe you're going out there and offering specials for people. Maybe you're doing mini sessions and you do blogs on the current mini session coming up, whether it be Easter, Christmas, Halloween. Halloween's one of the best ones to do mini sessions for because parents want their kids in their costumes. No more, back in the day, people used to take a picture with a Polaroid of Halloween costumes. Halloween costumes and first day of school are some of the biggest picture mini session days that you can do. Same with Christmas, but Christmas is more around family portraits, and you need to start doing that around Halloween so people have the images for their Christmas cards. But you can create a blog, and people are seeing that there's new content. SEO, search engines are seeing that there's new content, and it's going to move your website up in the rankings when people do searches, just because they know that you're interactive and you're posting new pictures. Maybe you had a really good session with a client, post the picture from the session. It'll get you attention and it'll keep your website fresh. Also, there's many providers out there that have templated websites. These are the sites that maybe are not so optimized with SEO because these companies grow. They all use the same strategies for SEO. So it's very hard to compete against other people that are using the same SEO strategy as you. And I'm talking about predefined templates like Wix, GoDaddy, Squarespace. Those are sites that if you're trying to generate revenue from photography, those are websites that I would stay away from. So I don't really suggest any of those unless you're just trying to market your website or you're trying to market your pictures. Then it's great. People will go out and see your pictures and you'll get attention, but you're not trying to attract that paying customer. If you're out there trying to attract that paying customer, there's a few different factors that I suggest. So first, your domain name. Your domain name needs to be something easy, and it needs to be something for your business that gets people's attention. It's easy to remember. It's easy to spell. I suggest Bluehost to register your domain names and your website. I was talking about how I used one service before, and when I went from using their service to Bluehost, my website traffic went up by 1,000%, 10 times. It went up 100 times the amount of people that were going out and visiting my website. Not every single month. Some months are much lower, but overall, year to year, my traffic went up about 1,000%. Also, using Bluehost for your domain name and website, you're going to have to get a theme. And the theme that I like is Divi. It's not super hard, and you don't need a whole bunch of whole bunch of knowledge to really get a website established using the Divi theme. There's just 2 or 3 different areas that you need to learn. And one thing that Divi does excellent for people to learn is they provide you instructions on YouTube. You can go out to YouTube, do searches on Divi. Divi Themes has a whole bunch of tutorials, but people put tutorials out there. How are they? You can go to YouTube and do searches on how photographers use the Divi theme, and it's going to come up with several different instructions on how to set up your website using Divi. I am a web developer in the past, and it took me a day, and I had an awesome looking website. Other people that I've worked with that I've helped establish websites for their business, they had a beautiful website within a week using Divi, and these are people that are ignorant when it comes to web development. They just don't know web development at all, but they went out and watched 3 or 4 different YouTube videos on how to create a website using the Divi theme, and they have a beautiful website. There's online tutorials. You really only need to know the basic features, and they have customizable templates too. You can download the Divi theme, do a search for photography templates, and there's a half a dozen different templates that you can use, and all you have to do is go and edit the context of each of the pages and update the context for your website. And as photographers, we really only need 3 pages for our website. We don't need much more than that. Again, the purpose of having a website as a photographer is to attract customers and have them book with you. You don't need anything more than that. You don't have to have a big portfolio for people to go and look at. Often when we put portfolios out there, you're going to have customers that see something they don't like, and they're just going to go to the next website. So keep it basic, keep it very small with what you're putting out in your website for people to see. That was a very long answer for that question, so I apologize. But having a website for your photography business is very critical. That's why I wanted to spend some time on it. You need to do the work up front, because otherwise you're just going to go and redo a lot of work or waste a lot of money. And again, I've tried all these different services, not just in my photography business, but my other businesses and my other clients that I've had when I did entrepreneur type mentoring. The next question, how do I name my business? Good question. And a lot of people don't put a whole lot of thought in how they name their business. And that's a mistake. I ran my photography business as Peter Spakowski Photography. How many of you listening know how to spell Peter Spakowski Photography? You probably know how to spell Peter. You probably know how to spell photography, but you don't know how the heck to spell my last name, Spakowski. So I've also named it Pete'sStudio.com. Well, when you type in Pete's Studio, there's 2 S's. And so that confuses people when it's 2 different words that end when one in the same letter and start with the same letter. So I created a podcast. It's actually episode 2. If you want to learn how to name your photography business, go back and listen to episode 2. There's a lot of complexity in naming your business, but you also want something that people are going to remember, something that is going to stick in their mind, that they can easily go out and tell somebody and know how to spell your domain name, and they remembered your domain name, so you can attract customers. You can give people business cards, but when they're out with friends, they're not going to have your business card on them. Most likely, they're not even going to have your information programmed into their phone to look up. So you want something easy that people can rattle off at a party to refer you to a friend, to a potential client. So it's important when naming your business, it's something that people can remember and something that is very marketable for you. So I really suggest that just don't use your name unless you have an easy name to spell, like Mary Jones Photography. You can name your business Mary Jones Photography, or Peter Hurley, the professional headshot photographer. Peter Hurley is easy to remember, let alone he's the best headshot photographer in the world. People will remember that name. But when it comes to names like mine, it's not so easy to remember. It's something I don't suggest that you name your business when it comes to naming your photography business. It needs to be something simple It needs to be something easy for people to remember, and it should also spark some questions. My business is 2mm studios. 2mm studios, yeah, people would think that 2mm has to do with the camera, but that really has nothing to do with why my studio's name is 2mm Studios. Again, go back and listen to episode 1 if you want to learn more about my photography business and what I named it. And episode 2, if you want to learn how to properly name your photography business. The next question, and it is, why did I choose Canon as my camera of choice? Now, when I got into photography, I had one person that was very influential in my photography. His name is Scott Kelby. So he has Kelby One online. Go and check out Kelby One. Everything I learned in photography, I learned from Scott Kelby when I first started. This is back in the early 2000s. And at that time, Scott Kelby was a Nikon shooter. So you would think, here's the person I'm learning photography from, I would choose Nikon. Well, Scott later in life changed to Canon, so he's now a Canon shooter. But picking the brand of camera is important because once you purchase your camera body, you're pretty much stuck because you're going to buy 4 to 12 lenses that are all the same manufacturer. If you buy a Canon and you buy all Canon lenses and you think, oh shoot, I want to buy Nikon now. Nikon has this great new camera. Yeah, well, you have all these other lenses that aren't compatible with Nikon. So it's important that you pick one and you stick with it. The reason I went with Canon, honestly, is my dad had a Canon camera. He had a Canon camera. He was a photographer also, not by trade, but as a hobbyist. But he also had video cameras. Back in the day when I was growing up, video cameras were very popular. And Canon was always the brand he bought. So it was the name that I was used to. It's the brand that I grew up with. But also, I researched the heck out of everything. So when I started getting into photography back in 2002, I really did research a lot with Nikon because Scott Kelby was shooting with Nikon. Sony wasn't as big as they are today. Back then, they still existed. Actually, the first camera I ever bought was a Sony Cybershot, but it was a more point and shoot camera. It was a portable one. It was a smaller one. It was just, it wasn't a professional camera, but that was the very first camera that I owned. So Sony was also part of the factor there, but they did not have the professional camera at that time that I was really interested in. So a lot came down to doing the research, and I researched between Nikon and Canon. Actually, my sister shoots with Nikon. She bought a Nikon shortly after I bought my first Canon, and it was really just the research I did at that time. So that's why I chose Canon. I'm happy with Canon. I've never thought about going to some other camera manufacturer, even with Sony producing some of the most beautiful mirrorless cameras that I've ever seen. The only time I actually ever thought about it was back in 2018 when I was at Photoshop World, and Sam Haddix was using a Sony mirrorless. It wasn't shortly after that Canon came out with the EOS R, and I purchased the EOS R mirrorless because I already had Canon and all my lenses would adapt. But it was something that was really tempting, was the mirrorless camera bodies. So that's why I chose Canon. The final question. And this is a good one. I'm kind of surprised by it, but it's a good one. It's a very good question. And as a hobbyist that's now taking on customers, paying customers, this is a good one. But I've started shooting and getting clients to come to my home. I don't want to get a studio yet, but the room I'm using in my house has a really big window that allows all kinds of light to come in. And how do I block the light? how do I answer that one? You have a gold mine. Why block the light? Some of the best pictures that you'll be able to take are standing people just outside of that window with the light coming in. You can do natural light photography. Natural light photography, you should be so lucky. Actually, if you ever do go look for a studio, make sure you look for a studio that has some kind of natural light coming in. A window in a studio is a gold mine. I know you go to Prestige and these other studios that have the studio in a warehouse and no windows, but come on. You have a window in your home studio. It's not costing you anything extra for your studio. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of natural, or you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of lighting to light the person beautiful. Use the light, use that window, use the natural light the best to your ability. What you can do is you can buy like a screen that filters out the light a little bit and just makes it softer. So you want to add some type of a diffuser screen. You can go and buy 9-foot diffuser screens from B&H and hang it up in the window. So it's still letting the light come in, but it's softer. So it just depends on the time of day. If you have really harsh light coming in that window, just diffuse it and use that light to take some of the most beautiful portraits you will ever take. Now, if you really do need to do some special lighting and you want to eliminate that light, I suggest buying some really dark, thick, light blocking curtains, or you could buy V-flats from V-Flat World. They have these V-flats. One side's white and one side's black, like a flat black, and a slightly glossy white on the other side. But you can use those to block light too. They work well if you want to put up partition screens. You can, if you want to stop reflection from different surfaces, V-flats are awesome. I highly recommend everybody get some V-flats. They're not very expensive, but if you have a natural light window in your studio, use it. It will be awesome. It will be some of the most beautiful pictures that you take with natural light. And again, it's cheap. It's free. How can you beat free lighting in your photography studio? So to answer that question is, if you really want to block the light, use V-flats or a heavy curtain. Otherwise, use the window to your advantage. Use the window and use that light that's coming in. You'll be happy you did. Just learn how to use the different light and learn how it lights each individual. Well, those are the questions today. Thank you for joining me here today. If you do have a question for future episodes, I'm going to try and do listener Q&A every 3 or 4 episodes. I've already got enough questions for the next podcast, but if you have a question, go out to 2mmacademy.com, go to the bottom of the website, and there's a form where you can fill out and ask questions of the show. I might move it up to the top. So if you're out there and it's at the top, just pay attention. The website page is not very long, but you can ask me a question there. Also, you can always email me at peter@2mmstudios.com. That's the show today. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to answering your questions in the future on future episodes of this podcast. Subscribe, go and submit. Give me a 5-star review. If the show's not capable or not a 5-star review in your mind, let me know. Use those same forums to give me suggestions. I'm happy to hear feedback. I want to make this show for you. I want the listeners to benefit the best they can from the show. Thank you very much. Till next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening today. We would love to hear from you and would love you to engage with the community. For more tools, tips, and know-how, head over to the 2mm Academy at 2mmstudio.com and join us.